It was a few weeks till Christmas, and not a podcast in sight. There wasn't even an episode lined up. That wasn't very bright.
Alright, what's the gimmick this time?
I was worried my friend was being so smart and so slick. So I thought of a comeback, and I thought of it quick.
You do know I can hear you, right? And why are you dressed like a green Santa?
Ho ho ho, but I am he, don't you see? Delivering presents, crazy and wacky. From microphone buzzlers to technological puzzlers. Each one so swish, you'll see me's done soon. Isn't that your wish?
Would you stop with the ridiculous rhyming? It'll affect our episode timing. Oh, god damn it, now I'm doing it as well.
Next thing you know, we'll be laughed at by the podcast community.
Good thing I've got diplomatic immunity.
Exactly, so we need a topic in a pinch.
Andrew, stop Dr. Seussing and put on the damn Grinch. These rhymes are gonna drive me barmy.
Welcome to Chatsunami.
Hello everybody and welcome to this very festive episode of Chatsunami. My name's Satsunami and joining me today is none other than the Christmas Grinch himself. It is Andrew. Andrew, welcome back.
The sun is out and the podcasting is bitchin'.
I'm surprised you can see that from your kitchen. I couldn't think of a better rhyme, okay? So how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm all Christmased up. I'm wearing my dinosaur Christmas jumper and my dinosaur Christmas socks. Dinosaurs are very important at Christmas to me.
Everyone knows that the three wise Stegosauri, came and delivered to the baby T-Rex. So for legal reasons, I'm getting waved down by the red panda lawyer. For legal reasons, that is indeed a joke. But yeah, I cannot believe, and I say this all the time when we're on an episode, and I go, I can't believe how fast the time has gone by and everything, but we are nearly at the end of 2024. We are nearly at the end of Christmas. As of recording this is only a couple of weeks away. My God, where has the time gone, Andrew?
No, it's absolutely flown by. This will be our first Christmas episode, I believe, of the holiday season. So I think we kicked things off with the anniversary episode, didn't we, of the month? But it's very exciting, kind of leading up to Christmas. I don't know if everyone else at home that celebrates has gotten their shopping done by now, but it's shaping up to be a really fun one.
Well, I know I sure haven't. I'm gonna be honest. I looked at the Black Friday sales, I looked everywhere else. Honestly, it gets harder and harder every year, which, judging by the topic that we're going to be talking about, it's a blessing and a curse because it means less of the Christmas cheer to steal.
Is it bad every time you're finishing a sentence, I'm hearing a rhyme in my head?
Well, to be honest, you could change podcasts instead. I mean... Now, to be fair, yes, we are just after, well, as you heard by the intro, we're just after recording that very wonderful rhyming scat there. What a tongue twister. So if you want to go into Patreon to listen to that, or rather listen to us fumble over those, and by fumble I mean more me, to be honest. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about a staple of the holiday season. And of course, no, it's not going to be dinosaurs. I'm sorry to break it to you, Andrew. But today we are going to be talking about another green animal of nondescript origins. That, of course, being the Grinch, which, honestly, is it safe to say at this stage, you can't really think of Christmas without thinking of characters like the Grinch, because, you know, you've got your Scrooges and you've got all the others. For brevity's sake, let's not list them all, but is it safe to say that the Grinch is up there as one of the most popular Christmas characters?
I think he's certainly one of the most well-known associations with Christmas, which is so funny because he's kind of the antithesis of the Christmas spirit, that I think people rally around the moodiness of the Grinch. They kind of enjoy him for that kind of aspect, because you always see loads of Grinch related sort of memorabilia in Christmas places. So people do enjoy his weirdness and his aesthetic.
And out of curiosity, what is your experience with the Grinch growing up? Was he a central part of your holiday rota when you were watching the original cartoon and the films, which we're going to be talking about in this episode, or was he kind of sidelined for other films?
I would say it was a Christmas regular for us. We would probably have the Grinch on each year. The Jim Carey live action one, we didn't really get the animated one from the 1970s, I want to say maybe the 1960s, too often. I'm not even confident that I ever saw it growing up. I thought it might have been until my adult years that I saw it. But I read the book growing up, and we weren't a big Dr. Seuss household, but we'd have like the Cat in the Hat. We had a bit of the Grinch. My mother did not enjoy enjoy the Jim Carrey Grinch movie. She really didn't like it. And so it wasn't a popular one around her to have on, but it was on TV so often around the Christmas time that you would just kind of watch it when it was on TV.
Funny enough, I think my mum's the exact same. She is not a fan of the Jim Carrey one, which is one of the ones that we're going to be diving into today. But yeah, it's really interesting because, again, I'm in completely the same boat as you here. I never really grew up with the original cartoon. I never really watched it growing up. I knew of it. You know that way when you see it referenced in other things, like one of the more famous ones is seeing Home Alone 2, when Kevin McAllister, the character, he's watching it in his room and there's that transition of the Grinch smiling and then it fades into Tim Curry's face, which is almost identical the way they're smiling. But beyond that, I never really watched the original, which apparently came out in 1966, which is absolutely wild. Well, sorry, I say absolutely wild, but I mean, when did Christmas Carol come out and we're still talking about it? So...
Well, I mean, the Dr. Seuss book came out even prior to that.
Yeah, true.
We're going Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens. We're going back a couple hundred years now.
Where we're going, we don't need dates. Yeah, to be honest, I never really grew up with the original, but I knew of it. I knew the iconography of it. And then in the year 2000, which I cannot believe it was 24 years ago, we got the live-action Jim Carrey version. And I feel bad for saying that because every time people say, oh, the live-action version, they always have to specify live-action Jim Carrey version. It's never the live-action Ron Howard version. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because he directed the movie. Yeah, and it's interesting as well because I don't think, at least to my knowledge, that there is another live-action Grinch movie. So that you would specify the Jim Carrey one is quite funny.
Yeah, because there's a musical, I want to say, or a stage show of some kind. I know there's that, but that's the only one we got. I think for obvious reasons, because there was a lot of, let's just say, controversy about the behind the scenes of this film. And I think after the disaster of Cat in the Hat, I want to say 3 years later or so, they kind of stopped putting their eggs into the live action Dr. Seuss basket, and then they moved more to the animated world.
Horton Hears a Who.
Yep, Horton Hears a Who, the Lorax, and of course the Grinch. We're going to be talking about the other one. So I think it was the best move at the time. But yeah, to look round quickly, that was one of the Christmas films that I would watch every year because it would always come on TV and everything. I think there is a lot of nostalgia for that film because I remember when, well, even before the film came out in 2018 for Illumination's The Grinch, I kind of rolled my eyes when I heard that they were remaking it, they were doing their own spin on it. I thought, oh, this isn't going to be as good as the Jim Carrey one. Fast forward a couple of years though, and of course, at this point, I'd met my partner, we'd moved in together, and I was saying to her, oh, you're going to love this film. I grew up with it, and I was showing her all the different Christmas films that I grew up with that she'd missed out on, one of which being the original Grinch, and by original, I mean the 2000s version. Suffice to say, I don't think she enjoyed it too much, and I don't blame her. And it is something we'll talk about later, but it is definitely a film of choices. You know, that way you watch it back as an adult and you go, wow, that was a choice in the script.
Decisions were made.
Yeah. It's like someone had to write that in the script. The Grinch gets catapulted into a woman's chest. It's like somebody got paid to write those words.
It was the horniest Christmas movie I think I've ever seen.
I mean, some landed, some didn't, but there was a lot of adult jokes. Obviously, they tried to blend it in with the kind of child-friendly aspects with innuendos and things, but yeah, there was a lot of that going on in this film. Whereas it's weird because when you watch the new one, and by new one I mean the one that came out 6 years ago, Christ, I'm old.
Oh my god.
See, when I say 2018 you don't flinch, but when I say 6 years ago, my god, the ravages of age and all that. But I remember watching that, I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I don't know whether it's the fact that, again, my girlfriend loves this version of it because it's kind of cutesy, and honestly, I grew to really appreciate it. I really like it as well, but there's definitely that nostalgia for the 2000s 2000s version, because the original is, and I want to say, I could be wrong, there could be a Dr. Seussian out there who say, oh, it's not that long, but I think it was around 20 minutes or so. You know, it's quite a short cartoon, the original one, I mean, and it's a very touching story for all two of you out there who don't know what the Grinch is about. You know, it's about a creature called the Grinch, a big green furry thing. He wants to steal Christmas because he doesn't like it, and then he discovers that Christmas is more than presents and the commercialism, which is something that we will touch on later for the other film. And it's a lovely message to teach kids that the season is more than about the presents, about the items and things like that. And of course, throughout the years, I don't think there's really been many Grinch adaptations, have there? I mean, there's been parodies, but not really a fully fledged one beyond the 2000 film and the 2018 film.
Yeah, no, there's not been too much. It's certainly part of the lexicon. It's referenced so much in just everything. Everyone loves to parody the Grinch and sort of bring it up as a big kind of joke, which it is. It is a joke of a property. It's very silly and it lends itself to that. But there's not been really any proper adaptations, to my knowledge, apart from the two we're talking about today and the original one.
I mean, it is bizarre because, as we were kind of joking about earlier, you know, you've got interpretations of older classic films, especially like It's a Wonderful Life and Christmas Carol, you know, ones that are relatively old, but they've got such a timeless core story that people try and adapt it and make it their own thing, and, you know, that borders into parody for a lot of things. Because even The Simpsons and, you know, cartoons like that, it's become so ingrained into pop culture that you just can't escape it this time of year. Even that miserable person in your life, you know for a fact that one person is going to buy them a Grinch, either a jumper or a bauble or a pair of socks. I know I've got a pair of socks as well. Grinch. I'm not miserable, I say to myself very confidently, but it's an absolutely timeless story. And as we were saying before, we are indeed going to be focusing on the interpretations of both these films. We're going to be seeing how each one handles the source material. And again, you know, this is going to be a very light-hearted discussion. We're not going to be criticising or taking away from anyone's nostalgia, because before we get into it, before we jump in, I went to Twitter/X, I went to Blue Sky, I went to Threads, and I asked the age-old question of what people thought about these films. So I feel as if this first comment encapsulates how strong the Jim Carrey version is, and it's from a user called Ghostie, who says that they prefer the Jim Carrey one as opposed to the Illumination one and a lot of the other ones. Because don't get me wrong, I have a fondness and nostalgia for this film, but I was really surprised at how much other people had. Not a bias, but a massive lean towards the live action one. I took to one of the groups that I'm in called The Guild on Twitter, filled with a bunch of amazing podcasters and content creators. So here's a couple of comments that they left. Dan B. Fierce said, I love them both, but the live action one holds a special place in my heart for personal reasons. Tis Yourself podcast says, love the Jim Carrey one, it's just so good. October Pod says, for me, if it ain't Boris Karloff, it ain't Grinch. In brackets, I say Grinchily. Our True Crime podcast says, as someone who isn't a Jim Carrey fan, I have to say the original was my favourite. The Social Detective podcast saying they're agreeing with the Tis Yourself podcast. Jim Carrey to me is the one true Grinch. He will always have my Christmas heart.
How many sizes is that heart?
Well, I'm looking at it just now. It's maybe one or two sizes too small. Don't worry, we'll work on that in the episode.
Oh, yeah, maybe by the end.
Like a spirit bomb getting that Christmas cheer up. Give me your energy.
Give me your cheer.
I know, Dragon Ball month's over. I'm sorry, I can't let go.
The crossover potential is unreal.
Oh, exactly. Could Goku beat up the Grinch? We'll never know.
Power scaling the Grinch.
Family Plot podcast says, here, although the live action one holds a special place in my heart because I saw it in the theatre with Dan B. Fierce, and because I recently learned that Jim Carrey hated the makeup and was going to quit before Ron Howard brought in a CIA expert in resisting interrogation techniques to help him through it. That is true. We will be touching on that. And to know that he was capable of giving the performance he did when he was so miserable is just amazing to me. The last two, of course, come from the social detective again replying to say that the original is special to her because her dad loved it so much. Being deaf, he loved the physical antics of the dog and she can still hear him laugh. So I watch it every year as a tribute to him. The Jim Carey was a favourite with my kids. Now when I watch it, I act out the scenes with my dogs. So the verdict is, yes, I'm insane, which, to be fair, I probably do that with my dog as well. Just to be like, the audacity. I don't get her to pull a sled though. The final two comments come from Blue Sky, by the way, shout out, we are on Blue Sky. Leo Allen says the 1966 original is his favourite, although the other two are great, but the original brings back so many core memories. Finally, Melfina, the VTuber, says, I grew up with the old cartoon, but I really loved the Jim Carrey one. I only recently saw the Illumination one, and it was alright and had some funny moments, but I don't know, something wasn't quite there for me. That is actually the perfect place to dive into this. So, Andrew, are you ready to get Grinchy with it? Whatever that means.
I don't want to explore what that means, to be honest.
Well, I'm going to get a dictionary. We're going to find out what getting Grinchy what it means.
Kind of rhyming dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we'll be right back after these festive messages. Welcome to Chatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunami, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
Fancy taking a humorous trip down a random topic each week? You do? Well, you're in luck. Casting Views, presented by me, Dan, and a host of guests, bring you just that. With topics from the world of entertainment, science, sport, and everyday life, there's bound to be a topic that's going to inform and amuse. Catch Casting Views every Sunday on all listening platforms now.
So, as we established there, we have two particular interpretations of this very iconic story. We have one that is probably a lot more faithful to the source material, and one that is probably taking a lot more liberties, and you'll probably guess which one's which. But before we begin, I'm going to throw you into the deep end here, Andrew, and I'm going to ask the question, what was your favourite interpretation out of the two?
It's tough, because the live action movie is so nostalgic to me and I enjoy it so much for that. I think the Illumination one is arguably a better film, but I don't feel it has the same kind of heart to it. And again, that might just be purely nostalgic. I think a lot of people of a younger demographic would go more towards the Illumination one as opposed to the live action one, because the live action one is just kind of weird and zany, whereas the Illumination one is very fun in a different way. It has a lot of pop songs and that kind of stuff in it, as Illumination loves to do. But my favourite is still the live action one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that take, to be honest, and not because I'm fearing the backlash and ostracisation of the community of podcasters listening to this, but in all seriousness, I feel as if the live action one, although I don't think a lot of what they were trying to do landed particularly well, I appreciate the fact that they went out of their way to try something new, to try and make something a bit more unique rather than rehashing the same story. Don't get me wrong, the Illumination one definitely does that, and I feel as if I compare the two, then objectively the Illumination one probably wins for me in terms of being, again, as you said, to borrow the phrase, a better film, because it's colourful, there's nothing really offensive in it, unless you have very, very sensitive sensibilities for it.
I like that it brings out a lot of very Seussical contraptions emotions and animals and stuff that you don't really get in the live action one, because they didn't really have the capacity to do that in a live action format. So the animated one certainly allows for more Seussian craziness.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is they definitely take advantage of that with the animation, because there's some films, and I absolutely hate when they do this, where they make an animated film but they use real life physics, if that makes sense. You know, they don't take advantage of the fact that it's an animation and they can do all these wacky things, but they keep it grounded and realistic. But for this particular one, they definitely take advantage of the silliness.
Cartoon physics.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it has a couple of really decent laughs in it, because I have to admit, the one that they kept showing in the trailers and it did make me laugh was the cranberry scene. You know, when he's in the supermarket and she says, "Are you going to take those cranberries?" And he's like, "No." And then he puts it on the top shelf and then he just bangs it and it smashes. And again, it's like a very tame reaction, but I thought there was a lot of innocent humour in it.
Mm-hmm. He interacts with the townspeople a lot more as well, and you kind of get a bit more of a sense that he's a part of this community despite not enjoying the community and being a complete kind of
Grinch.
Yeah, being a bit of a dick to the rest of the town. He still has that kind of association, and they're still pretty friendly with him. They still ask him to do different things, and that neighbor guy is always trying to be friends with him.
I feel as if in that one, he's definitely the nicer Grinch, which I know sounds so weird, like an oxymoron to say he's the nicer Grinch, but when you compare his relationship between him and his dog Max, you feel as if at least he cares about Max's well-being in the animated one, whereas although he does care about Max in the live action one, you do feel as if there's a kind of strange relationship there.
Yeah, pretty much the same note that I made, that the animated one seems to show a lot more love towards Max. Him and Max seem to have a lot more of a cooperative relationship as well. Max is this kind of like servant where he like delivers him breakfast in the morning kind of thing.
Like Wallace and Gromit, essentially.
Yeah, it is very Wallace and Gromit, actually. I didn't think of that, but it is very Wallace and Gromit.
Wallace and Gromit quoted.
Wallace and Grinch.
Wallace and Grinch, yeah. Where's that crossover, Aardman? Where's that crossover? There probably is in the dark depths of our archives.
There's not enough clay in the world to do that.
I was going to say, there's not enough clay to cover Jim Carey again.
Did you know that the company that makes the Aardman animation clay closed down? And like no other clay company does that kind of clay. And so there's a concern that that kind of stop motion stuff is going to be like wiped out. That was years ago, though. I don't know if it's been resolved since then.
Oh God, I hope so. Any Wallace and Gromit fans out there listening to this, there's like a Venn diagram of Grinch fans and Wallace and Gromit fans in the middle of this Venn diagram, being like, "Don't you worry, Satsu and Andrew, I'll get that answer to you." Genuinely, no, I'd be very curious to hear. So please feel free to reach out. But yeah, going back to the characterization of the Grinch is a bit horrid, but he's not really a Grinch, you know, and that sounds so weird to say it like that, but he doesn't seem as if he embodies the nastiness and horribleness and meanness. He's very much a child-friendly Grinch, which don't get me wrong, they all are child-friendly, but he seems a lot more tame, and overall it makes the film the safer of the two watches, whereas I feel as if it wasn't for Jim Carey as the Grinch in the 2000s version, then I don't think this film would have been well received, do you?
Yeah, he brings his Jim Carrey energy to the performance in such a beautiful way that it endears you to the movie and to his character, that like he is horrible and you love him for it. He plays it up in such a fantastic way that there aren't many actors like that can pull it off in that way. I agree. The Illumination Grinch doesn't quite have that sinisterness to him. Even if you look at like the 1966 one, the Grinchy grin is synonymous. The little curled up evil grin that he does, that is so synonymous. And I don't feel like that gets really embodied within the Illumination Grinch. Cumberbatch does an okay job, but he just sounds like a guy.
I mean, can you imagine if he gave him the smog voice?
At least his American accent's getting a little bit better, because some of Cumberbatch's American roles have been pretty rough.
Yeah, I have to say, as a British person and by extension Scottish, I don't really notice the differences as much when British actors and other actors put on an American accent, but it must be so distracting for a lot of Americans watching the film going, what accent is he putting on? Because I know he sometimes has the American accent, he slips into his own accent, it kind of goes back and forth, whereas again with the live action one, Jim Carrey just goes for it and all of his Jim Carrey-ness. And do you know the backstory behind that with his trials and tribulations, as it were?
With regards to his prosthetics?
Yeah, with the suit and everything.
Yeah, so for everyone who isn't aware, the process to get Jim Carrey ready for each day of shooting, it was around like 8 hours or something that it took to get him fully Grinched up. What did you say earlier? Getting Grinchy with it?
Yeah, getting Grinchy with it.
Jim Carrey took 8 hours to get Grinchy with it.
That's a scientific term.
Exactly. It's like when we talked about Gunganization.
Do you know what we should do? We should really have like a Chatsunami dictionary. Just collect these terms.
That's a good idea. Yeah, so he was getting Grinchified. He was getting Grinchy with it for 8 hours each time, and it was horrendous. Because as you imagine, getting all that plaster put on you and painted and all the different things that kind of come with it, and for that long period of time, it would be pretty taxing. He was very close to quitting, and the studio brought in a guy whose profession was to like help CIA operatives deal under interrogation and torture. And so he got trained in how to deal with torture in order to play the Grinch. I mean, Jim Carrey was already pretty wacky, but the kind of craziness that he kind of embodies as part of that role might be explained by some of that.
Yeah, because I was watching an interview that he did with, I think it was Graham Norton, and he was talking about this, how he actually put a hole through his trailer on the first day. Because as you said, it took them about, I think, 8.5 hours the first time. And then I think after he rightfully, well, I'm not justifying him punching out the trailer, but, you know, he was rightfully outraged about it and he was close to quitting. And then I think Ron Howard eventually had to get someone in to, as you were referring to as well, get the CIA guy to teach him different tactics, which apparently included hitting yourself in the leg, smoking, eating anything that was just in reach, just a whole load of other things that people under torture would go through and try to take their mind off of that, never mind a prosthetic Grinch costume, which apparently I think it was made up of yak hair that they had to sew into the thing. Oh, it was absolutely horrific. I think the only saving grace, if you can call it that, is they managed to cut down the process, and maybe it was longer, but I'm sure they managed to cut it down to 2.5 hours, I think, eventually. But they had similar issues with the other Whos, because you know how they've got the weird noses and no eyebrows and everything.
Except for Cindy Lou, who was deemed too young to apply prosthetics, so they came up with the excuse in the movie that she hasn't grown into her nose yet.
You know, it's something that you don't really, as a kid, you don't really pick up on or think, hey, wait a minute. But yeah, for very legal reasons, and I mean that in all sincerity, that they couldn't apply prosthetics to a child, which is definitely the right call, because if they're hiring the CIA or someone affiliated with the CIA to teach the Grinch torture prevention tactics, it is just as crazy. In a way, I suppose it shows the dedication of Jim Carrey. You know, I think if it was 8 hours every single time, he would have been well within his rights just to walk away from it, or they would have had to have thought of something else. But at the same time, without Jim Carrey, without his performance, without his quotability as well, because he's got so many good scenes, doesn't he?
Yes, there's some absolutely fantastic scenes with him and how he's able to express himself, and his body language, his physical performance is just so wonderful.
Because it's something that we were talking about earlier with the comments that people were leaving, especially with the Social Detective podcast, that it's a very physical film in the sense of its comedy.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, obviously Jim Carrey at the time, and even nowadays, but especially back then, is a very physical comedy actor, considering he is buried under those layers of makeup and latex and whatever. The fact that he's buried under that and he can still have an emotive performance is nothing short of incredible, to be honest. It is just absolutely insane what they managed to pull off. Again, I think out the two of them, they definitely embodied the horribleness of the Grinch. Taking off my nostalgia glasses here, I think the one thing that the film maybe fails at is getting the point across. See, when you rewatch this, did you feel that way? That the original one kind of, I didn't really get the message of the original, as good as it was.
Well, it's interesting because what seems to have happened is because the story of the Grinch is a very interesting one, because The idea being that Christmas is this lovely thing, but we take it for granted and we kind of have misunderstood what it's about, that it's not all about the presents and the excess and the items. It's about being together and the joy and the spirit of each other. So the original story, the Grinch assumes that everyone's obsessed with presents, which they are to an extent, but then learns actually this town isn't so bad and they aren't just obsessed with presents. I've misunderstood them. They actually have a big heart and that they appreciate the other things and the small things in life and that kind of stuff. Ron Howard took that kind of baseline concept of commercialism is bad and like ran with it. He was like, this is what the movie is going to be heavily focusing on. I'm going to make this town of Whovians, Whoville.
That's another snowflake.
Yeah, absolute monsters. They're all selfish and self-absorbed and always fighting with each other and competing against each other, and they're obsessed with gifts and presents and shiny things and
hoo-hash.
But then as soon as Christmas is done, they all chuck it away. They don't actually care about things it's like getting, and then they just get rid of it very soon afterwards. And that was kind of what Ron Howard ran with, and Cindy Lou is the message through that like, no, that's not what Christmas should be about. I've learned that it's not this, and I'm going to teach you, Grinch, that we don't think like that. But the people do, and she has to kind of convince them. Whereas the Illumination one, the people aren't as present obsessed, and it doesn't take much from Cindy Lou for everyone to be like, okay, well, presents are gone, so what, we have each other. The mum gives a little kind of pep talk to her, and then they all chime up, and the Grinch is like, oh, okay, I was wrong. And so they still get to the kind of the same conclusion, but one just kind of paints society in a much darker light than the other, which might be more true to life, but it isn't necessarily the message that Seuss was going with. It's a much more extreme message.
I am so conflicted about how I feel about it, because on the one hand, I would say, obviously, minus one or two embellishments for the Illumination one, like with Pharrell Williams narrating it, and with a very kind of updated pop
You don't know that Dr. Seuss didn't have Pharrell Williams in mind when he was writing the story.
Oh, definitely. His crystal ball moment being like, this is the perfect person. Whereas in the live action one, it's Anthony Hopkins, and I'm going to be honest, if it's Anthony Hopkins versus most people, I think Anthony Hopkins would win, because he's just got such an iconic voice.
It's interesting that Boris Karloff in the 1966 one was both the Grinch and the narrator.
Oh, he does a fantastic job at that, though. I just want to point that out. From what I've watched of the original, it is an iconic voice, and it works so well for that. And don't get me wrong, Anthony Hopkins isn't really around for much of it. He's obviously around for the beginning, the end, and maybe a couple of bits here and there.
Walter Matthau narrated the book in the 90s.
Yeah, shout out to him as well. But yeah, as you were saying at the very beginning, I feel as if with Illumination, if you've seen one Illumination film, then you've probably seen them all. They follow a very similar format in the way they're structured, especially with the characters, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a very safe and clean version.
The dog was very like Secret Life of Pets looking.
He actually reminded me of my own dog with the big snoot and everything.
No.
Yeah. Whereas with the live action one, again, we're getting a very gritty Whoville. It's a bit like the difference between Superman versus Batman, I'm going to be honest. It's like we've got the shiny metropolis and everything, and oh, look at how wonderful things are here, versus
we live in a society, Gotham.
Yeah, exactly. This is where my parents abandoned me, Max. Oof. It's quite dark, to be honest, and there is that age about it that, on the one hand, again, if we're looking at this as a faithful adaptation, it's not really. Ron Howard leans into a lot more cynicism, especially when it comes to the commercialisation of Christmas, which is, ironically enough, a staple in a lot of Christmas films. Just look at our review a couple of years ago of Jingle All the Way. But at the same time, without that cynical edge, I don't know if this would have been as memorable. Genuinely, I feel as if they had kept it quite clean and faithful to the original, no one would be talking about this 24 years later, would they?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Jim Carey is the standout from the movie, which is what everyone really thinks about. Not so much the cynicism of the film, but I do agree that the direction it went in was so unique and just off the wall that it does kind of live long in the memory. Partly because I've seen it so many times now over the years, I can just kind of play the whole movie in my head, scene for scene. It doesn't require much of a watch at this most recent time to just be like, okay, I'm good to go. I kind of know the dialogue for the most part that happens. I still watched it and I still kind of enjoyed watching it, but I didn't really need to pay full attention to it because I knew beat for beat what happens.
No, I have to admit, I'm the same for that. It is a film that I think if you were growing up around that time, you have seen hundreds of times, that you could probably quote it word for word. As I said before, when I showed this to my partner who had never seen this version of The Grinch before, I was saying things like, oh, I loved this film growing up, it was great. And there is nothing more sobering than showing someone, like a fresh pair of eyes especially, something that you have grown up with and enjoyed as a child, and you know, never given it a second thought about why this happens, why that happens, and then they watch it and they're like, why did that happen, why did this happen, what is this and that, and you start to question that. You're like, well, actually that is a bit weird, and so is this and that. And you made a joke about it earlier about this being quite a risque version of The Grinch, and it really is at times. And again, you know, it's nothing too scandalous, but still it's kind of weird that it's happening in a Dr. Seuss film of all things. You've got the Christmas canon scene, you know, when she's putting up the lights and everything.
A quote from my wife while we were watching this was, that is the sexiest thing that's ever been in a children's movie. She's holding this lighting gun to her crotch and like pounding back and forward as it fires them out, and her tongue is out at the side while she's doing it. And then she wipes off her brow like, whew, afterwards.
And then she blows it.
Oh yeah, then she blows at the end of it, doesn't she? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was absolutely insane. My partner, she quote said, Martha May Whovier is a bad bitch and I love her.
Yeah, you should get that on a t-shirt, to be fair.
There is so many weird scenes like that, though. When they explain about the little Who boys and Who girls that kind of arrive in the little baskets, and there's the comment made by the dad being like, oh, he looks like your boss.
Yes. Uh-huh.
These kind of jokes that you just don't get when you're a kid, and then you watch back and you're like, oh. There's like loads of kind of jokes about infidelity, and there's like a key party scene that is shown where for those unaware, grown-ups go to a party together, put keys into a bowl, and then I think the ladies pick keys out at the end of the night, and whoever's car that they've picked, they go home with.
Is that what that was?
Oh, you weren't aware?
No.
Yeah, that's what the implication of the party was. They were all putting the keys in the bowl.
Oh
in
my
the party.
God.
Yeah, so it's a key party.
Oh my God. Is that why they have the thing at the end where they say, oh, we didn't find them until the next morning because they were too busy getting Grinchy with it?
Oh, quite possibly, yeah.
Oh God. Oh wow. This rabbit hole goes deep. Oh my God.
Yeah, so the stuff like that, as you mentioned earlier, he gets catapulted and falls into Martha May Whovier's breasts, and she is also so horny for him when she's like describing her experience of the Grinch and talking like the muscles, just like various actions that he does, like when he returns to town, she faints from just pure horniness, I guess.
Just raw masculinity right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, it's just so bizarre how weird and horny this movie is. Like, there's also, I referenced it earlier, he swears in this children's movie. He talks about the snow being bitchin', which is pretty tame for the most part, but it is a children's movie, so it's a bit weird that they would include that.
Because, I mean, it is a PG, isn't it? I mean, it's not got anything... Again, I'm reluctant to say overly offensive, but watching back, there are a couple of scenes where, again, you say, wow, that was a choice. Because this is a problem I have with this film. This is probably my biggest problem I have. And again, I just want to reiterate that I do love this film. I think it is, nostalgia or not, I do think it is very entertaining to watch. But at the same time, what I don't like is the fact that all the Who's, bar, of course, Cindy Lou Who, is quite irredeemable until she comes into the picture and is like, oh, let's, unite, hold hands and sing. Because the whole point, and this is something I was saying to you before we started, but the whole point of The Grinch is the Grinch thinks that this is such a shallow holiday, that it's all about the gifts, about the extravagance, the utter affluence of it, people outdoing one another. So he steals that particular symbol of Christmas, and everybody is going to be miserable. They're going to realise, oh, our holiday's ruined. And then, of course, there's that heartwarming moment where, of course, he listens for the cries like the asshat that he is, but then he realises that, oh, they're not crying, they're celebrating, because there's so much more to this holiday season. It's about community, it's about getting together with your loved ones and things. And I know obviously there's a lot more to that, it's being very simplistic, but that is the kind of core message that it usually portrays, at least for the original. And I think the Illumination film film does a great job of this as well, because no one's really angry that the presents are gone. They're upset initially, but then they go, you know what, we're fine, we've got our health, we've got each other, let's just sing and be happy that we're here. Whereas in this one, you're watching this, and again, I think I'm affected by one of the lines you mentioned earlier, but you're watching this like the Joker. You're like, maybe the Grinch has a point here.
Some people just like to watch the world burn.
You get what you deserve.
Martha May Whoville.
Why did you say that name? Why is the mayor such a dick in this film? That's something that genuinely boiled my you-know-what. I was so angry at that when it flashes back and he's like, oh, look at the beard on him. And it's like, is this low-key Whovian racism here? Because he's the only green person of his kind here. And they're like, why are you ragging on the Grinch so much here?
It was wicked before wicked.
Exactly. True. I've got no follow-up comment. It's just true. Right. Yeah, he's horrible to him. And of course he gets bullied and everything by the mayor. And don't get me wrong, the mayor is a fun character to watch be horrible to people. But then you remember this is the Grinch. The whole point is him misunderstanding the holiday and then coming to realise that it's not as bad as he thinks it is. But yeah, he's totally justified in a lot of this. I'm not obviously endorsing theft or anything or ruining people's holidays, but at the same time, they are so horrible to him. They build him up as this irredeemable monster that nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot barge pole.
One thing that's never explicitly said, but is in my own headcanon as well, is Max. I think the background of Max is that he was a Christmas gift that was thrown out.
Oh.
And that the Grinch took him in, and that is part of his hatred towards Christmas, that they would throw out someone like Max, and he sort of relates to him in that way.
Well, I mean, he makes that comment about kids wanting a pony before they sell them to the glue factory. Just as a throwaway line, but my God, that is really sad, but also makes perfect sense. Yeah, to be honest, he is just such a tragic figure in the 2000s one. And I know obviously it's a comedy and he really owns the whole being alone and being quite manic with it all, because I love that when he's on his own in his Grinch cave, whatever you call that.
Mount Crumple?
Is it Mount Crumpet?
Mount Crumpet.
Yeah, Mount Crumpet.
It's like a hat though, the mountain.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I don't know if you've played Banjo-Kazooie, but it reminds me of Spiral Mountain, where it's just like the witch's head on top of like this thing. Obviously minus the face.
It's like a witch's hat. Again, bringing me back to Wicked, it's a bit like the Wicked Witch of the West's hat.
Yeah, there's a lot of fan fiction that's going to be written after this episode, isn't there?
The Wicked book itself is fan fiction.
Ah, well, true. I'll concede to that is very true. So yeah, he's got the scene, of course, where he's going through his list of daily activities like his jazzercise, curing world hunger, dinner with himself that he can't cancel again.
His voicemail.
Yeah, his voicemail. I love the scene, see, when he's got the echo, when he says, I'm an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot.
I was going to bring that up as well, because that's one of my favourite scenes. Like, it's so simple and so stupid, but it's one of my favourite scenes in the movie. I think it's very clever.
But thinking back to the Illumination version, it's quite funny how you think about it and you think, oh yeah, that had funny moments. And don't get me wrong, it did. It had kind of cruel comedy, but still quite funny. But at the same time, there's nothing that really, bar one or two maybe scenes, there's nothing that really stands out as memorable for that film.
They do other weird physical comedy, like he ate 2 months worth of food rations because he was just had depressive food episodes.
I have to admit, I found that funny.
Which was funny, and so they have things like that instead, which you don't really get in the live action one. But as you say, they don't really have the threatening voicemail or the echoing.
I actually just remembered what you were talking about with the threatening voicemail. I'll hunt you down and gut you like a fish.
Then he's surprised there's no voicemails again.
He's like, Again, there's so many quotable moments. There's that. There's the weird doctor that, see, to this day, I think about this quote like on the regular. When, remember, he's doing the competition to become holiday cheermeister and he's getting fed the pudding, and there's this like scientist that comes out and goes, "This is not pudding." And he's like, "What is it?" And it's like bright green and jiggly. You're like, what is that?
Yeah, that looked horrible. There's big stuff full of different puddings and fudges or whatever it was.
I mean, to be fair, it was a good anti-torture technique, I suppose.
I mean, yeah, after the prosthetics, I don't think Jim Carrey needed much more of that.
Again, there's so many moments in that film that you could quote, that you could reference. I mean, again, going back to the physical comedy, even the dog is absolutely amazing in that film. The amount of things they obviously trained him to do. I love the scene when he's auditioning for Rudolph.
He like kicks off the antler and then...
No, it's the... he kicks off the red nose and he's like, brilliant! You reject your own nose because it represents Christmas. And you're like, that is actually really funny. There's just so many quotable moments that I just don't think is captured in the new one. But again, when I say new one, I mean the one from 6 years ago. But there's just that cynical edge where I think, as a standalone alternate reality Grinch, maybe. I mean, you know, I'm not very picky about the continuity of the Seuss-verse or whatever you call it. But yeah, I think with the Grinch, that did inspire Cat in the Hat and that kind of brand of humour, you know, where it was a lot more innuendo oriented.
Mm-hmm. It's very early 2000s.
Oh yeah.
You don't really get that kind of stuff anymore.
No.
For better or worse. The Dr. Seuss Grinch book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, is very brief. And really the story that you get, you don't really get his origin, to my knowledge. You kind of just are given this idea that there is a creature that lives on this mountain that hates Christmas, hates everything about it, and wants to do something to make it stop. He decides he has a horribly wicked, terribly wonderful plan, or whatever the wording is of it. He pretends to be Santa. He goes down, steals all the toys and the Christmas trees and all that kind of stuff. He brings it up to Mount Crumpet and then realizes that the Who children and Who people don't care that this happened. They still have the Christmas cheer, and his heart grows 3 sizes and he has an epiphany and he's better for it. It looks like I've skipped over some stuff, but I haven't really. That's kind of it. It's very brief. And so to pad out a movie, each of these films decided to give him an origin story. So we got the arrived in a basket and was like this weird evil baby that was raised by these 2 women and then was like bullied in school, but was loved by Martha May Whovier and he loved her, and then was embarrassed by an incident with his beard and so ended up running away, and then sort of was just kind of grumpy after that. Whereas the Illumination one, he was an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, seemingly alone. This orphanage in a town that is obsessed with Christmas did not celebrate Christmas, and so he felt like he was kind of left out from Christmas and so was sad because of that. If I'm remembering that wrong, then please correct me.
No, I think you're right, but I do agree, it is kind of weird to have an almost Mean Girls moment, you know, where it's like, here's your candy cage, here's your roast beast, and none for the orphans, bye. Like, how cruel is that?
You go, Glen Coco.
4 Who hashes for you, Glen Coco Who. You go, Glen Coco Who. Yeah, that is a bit grim, I have to say. Something I never really thought of there, but that is actually, yeah, that is actually very grim. No, but I don't think you've really missed much there, because at the end of the day, and that is something we've reiterated, it is a very simple story, but at the same time, it's a different approach depending on what you're watching.
I preferred the Cindy Lou Who in the live action more than I did in the Illumination. I found Cindy Lou Who in the live action to be very cute. I found the Illumination one to be quite annoying. The desire from the Illumination one to do something special for her mum was very sweet. And it was interesting that they kind of went with a single mum of 3 kids as opposed to the live action one where it's a whole family and she has like 2 older brothers and she kind of just gets ignored.
Yeah, what happened to her dad? Did he go to find Santa and he just never returned?
He got lost in that key party.
Did the Grinch kill him? That's the question. All the true crime podcasters who will no doubt be listening to this, please hit us up with your best theories, because we gotta know what happened to Cindy Lou Who's dad.
I mean, based on the lore that the 2001 set up, you don't need a father. You just arrive in a basket.
True.
Maybe there doesn't need to be a dad.
But there needs to be a key party, apparently.
That's very fundamental for some reason.
Yes. It was the one part in the script that was underlined, which is really weird.
We're really keen on the script, but why are you focusing on this strange orgy party that's happening? It's very important to my vision. Dude, I was...
It's like, you have Ron Howard saying that, and just in the background, Jim Carey's screaming like, oh!
I'll be with you soon, Jim.
1 minute, Jim. I gotta get the angle right for the orgy.
I was a child actor, don't you know?
Oh, God.
I was friends with River Phoenix.
That's nice, Mr. Howard. Can I take this Who mask off? Do you know what I actually do wonder, though? Is see the scene at the very beginning when he's running around town and he's got the hood up and the mask and everything. Do you think he had the full prosthetics on underneath that mask?
Huh.
Or do you think they just gave him a day off that day?
Doesn't seem like the kind of set that was giving him a day off.
Yeah, true. He probably had it. It's like, Ron, I'm wearing a mask for God's sake. Let me take it off. It's like, no, it's integral to my vision of the Grinch. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Howard, our benevolent leader. Yeah, to kind of wrap up on that point, a very weird point, but a point nonetheless. I feel as if we're looking at both of them, the Illumination one definitely is the safe one, it is the least offensive, but it does a good job of encapsulating the spirit of the Grinch and the light-heartedness of it. But at the same time, it's just not as memorable. But again, on the flip side of the flip side here, do you think it's not as memorable to us because we didn't grow up with it? Like, do you think kids nowadays growing up with that would be more likely to gravitate towards that version?
I think that is more likely, because I mean, I'm baffled sometimes by some of the things that are popular now. I'm not a fan of a lot of Illumination's work. I don't like the Despicable Me Minions verse.
Oh, Martin's going to beat you up for that.
Yeah, I know. But it's so popular. And I don't get it, but I'm not the demographic for it anymore. So I understand that kids are going to like different stuff now. And it's quite likely. I know I have two nieces, both of whom love the Illumination Grinch movie. They watch it probably more than the other one. My brother grew up watching the Jim Carey one, but they will be more likely to watch the Illumination one. Because again, it's also, we were talking about some of the kind of more risky things. Now that parents who grew up with those movies, they kind of watch back and they go, oh, actually, that's not very child appropriate. And so they're less inclined to then show their kids that at that age, at least. Where so if you're younger, you're more likely to watch the Illumination one because it's a bit more squeaky clean.
It is weird looking back in these kind of films, and it's definitely a sign of the times, because my partner and I rewatched Ghostbusters the other day. On the one hand, you see all the toys and things for it, you see the Ecto one, you see, oh look, they're chasing down funny ghosts, haha. But when you rewatch that, and of course it's a film of the 80s, so there's a lot of tropes that
don't age well.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, Bill Murray is an absolute fiend.
Why did you say that like you were starting off a Netflix documentary? Bill Murray is a fiend. I have to tell this story.
The truth must come out.
The Bill Murray Chronicles. Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I do not know, and maybe I'll get the ire of Ghostbusters fans out there, why they chose him as the leading man. I will never know. Rewatching it, I was like, yeah, he is despicable.
He's such a creep.
He really is. I mean, granted, fortunately, he holds himself back when she's possessed and everything, but yeah, beyond that, he is just a total creep throughout the whole film. And again, you know, it's the 80s, it was different tropes, different times, etc. And that probably might be an episode that...
Different strokes for different tropes.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something you'd see in the family-friendly Jim Carey version, clearly, where he burns down a tree and causes several car crashes. There is a body count in this film.
What's with the really tiny Whovians?
I do not know.
That was such a weird thing that was added in. I don't know if that's a Dr. Seuss thing with the Grinch as well. They're all like a snowflake. And so they're all tiny people on a snowflake. And then there's tinier people that just kind of live in society with them.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, is that kids? And then it's like, no, they've got the makeup and everything. You're like, yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, the Horton Here's a Who people that live in the flower, were they just taking a holiday or something? And the snowflake, what is going on in this world? The world building. All joking aside, obviously you have to suspend your disbelief, and it's a wacky world with a green man who steals Christmas. But at the same time, yeah, that was weird. I don't get the lore reasons of that. Again, not the weirdest thing in the film, but still enough for you to raise an eyebrow and go, that Grinch probably killed people. I mean, he probably killed that yodeling person.
Yeah, there's such weird scenes, like when he's going through and he's going down the tree and then he crashes the tiny car and he's like, everyone move, and he runs away and it has this like huge explosion.
What I love about that, this is my final point, but what I love about that is after the devastation, you see the tree burnt and dead, and you know the mayor's first thought isn't, are the people safe? Is everybody okay? His first thought is to go to a child and go, well done, you ruined Christmas.
I know. He immediately looks to blame this child.
Oh, he is a despicable human being. The one thing Ron Howard did get 110% down was just the despicableness of that guy.
Of government.
Of government. Of the system.
It's a very libertarian movie.
Yeah. It's probably got a manifesto. # steal trees. For legal reasons, that's a joke. Do not steal trees. In all seriousness, I do think, and this sounds like such a non-committal way to wrap up the episode, but genuinely, it's really just down to personal preference. If you are looking for that cozy nostalgia blanket and you're looking for that physical comedy, then Jim Carey's version is the one for you. But if you're looking for that quote-unquote more squeaky clean version, which is also a great crack at the original story, then yeah, definitely go for that. Or alternatively, do what I did. Watch both at the same time. Watch the original while you're at it.
What, side by side? Did you have them on side by side?
Yeah, I had Subway Surfers at the bottom as well. Yeah.
Oh,
and
nice.
Family Guy in like a corner. Yeah. I'm part of the TikTok generation now, apparently. No, jokes aside, I did watch it one day after the other. I also watched Nativity, which is a great film we should review sometime. But
I've never watched that.
oh, it's so good. But again, that is a story for another episode. So Andrew, thank you so much for coming on this episode and getting Grinchy with it.
No, thank you so much for inviting me on to talk about these two movies. It gave me kind of a chance to watch the Illumination one. I've been holding off on watching it for so long because I just kind of protested the existence of it, but I've learned that it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and that is not the opinion of my wife. She hated it, but it was good to be able to sort of talk about this and apparently educate you on some of the innuendos that were hidden in the 2000 movie.
I'm going to be celebrating Christmas as a very different person this year. Just like, I know this. Why do I know this? But no, in all seriousness, thank you so much for coming on, and yes, indeed, celebrating this iconic set of films. But before we wrap up and wish these lovely listeners a very Merry Christmas, where can these lovely listeners find your content?
Thank you so much for asking. They can find me on many other similar Chatsunami episodes, wherever podcasts can be found, Chatsunami. We recently did Dragon Ball Month, so I was on 3 episodes of that. So I'm on many of the episodes over the past couple of years, so please do check them out. Only listen to mine. Mine are the better ones, but yeah, if you want to listen to the others, then yeah, I guess that's fine too. You can also find me on Twitter. I do have Blue Sky, but I don't really use it. You can find me on Twitter at GreenShield95, and you can find my other podcast that I also do with Satsunami, and as well as fellow co-host Martin McAllister and Robert Baltoaster, which is a D&D Let's Play podcast called Stop, Drop, and Roll Initiative, or SDRI Pod, and that can be found on all good podcast platforms, Stop, Drop, and Roll Initiative, and on Twitter at SDRI Pod. But what about you, Satsu?
Well, I'm glad you asked. If you would like to listen to more episodes from ourselves, as well as all upcoming episodes and theme months, then you can listen to us on our website, chatsunami.com, as well as all good podcast apps. I also want to thank our amazing Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster, Sonia and Ghostie. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And if you'd like access to exclusive episodes, early access, as well as Andrew's key tips about the Grinch, then of course you can check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/Chatsunami. And of course, just to reiterate, if you would like to check us out on other social media, you can check us out on Twitter/X at ChatsunamiPod, or if you want to check us out on Blue Sky, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, but yep, we are indeed on Blue Sky at Chatsunami, so feel free to check us out there. And we are indeed everywhere. We are on Instagram, we are on YouTube, we are in all the lovely places, so definitely come and check out our content. But on behalf of everybody at Chatsunami, and I'm sure you'll agree, Andrew.
Oh, my heart's grown 3 sizes. Call an ambulance. Call an ambulance.
Yep, as I wrap up this episode quickly to call an ambulance. In all seriousness, I just want to wish all the lovely listeners out there who are celebrating this festive season a very Merry Christmas. As always, stay safe this holiday season, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.
Stay Grinchy.